What's up, creative community? My name is Lorenzo from the Coach MC studio, and today in this video we're gonna talk about how to memorize the lines way quicker, way better, way more profound, with way more impact, and how to associate right away when we're learning the lines, images, metaphors, colors, temperatures, and emotions to the lines, so we can stratify, internalize them way better, so you will be ready for your next big upcoming audition, even if you have big text in no time, and you will leave a lasting impression. So let's see what's cooking. Let's start with the foundation. Let's get a deeper understanding of what's going on. When it comes to memorizing the lines, it's not about going crazy right away and playing and jumping into the character. First of all, we have to internalize the structure of the speech, of the presentation, of the monologue, of the scene. We have to deal with some fundamental and basic instruments. It's like architecture sometimes. You need a strong foundation, and then you can build up that whole and beautiful building, and then you can place some ornamentation, some nice decor. You can start painting the whole thing and put sprinkles on top and frosting and icing, and then it looks totally yours and totally amazing. But first we need some fundamental rules, some fundamental basics. We need to lay down a strong foundation, an understanding of what's going on, and then you can go crazy. So let's start with some very simple and basic rules of the memorization process that you can exercise right away in your place at home and implement it right away with your next big upcoming audition. So whether it's a scene, a strong monologue, a pitch, a sales presentation, whether it's a big text or a small text, this is the fundament that you will need anyway, anyhow, anytime. Let's get right to it. You need to understand. It's like the church. You need that understanding. You need that foundation. So what do you need to understand? You need to understand what you're saying. And you see, the word understanding comes from masonry, comes from that medieval period where we were building those magnificent cathedrals and amazing churches. First of all, you need to excavate a ditch in the ground, step down and look up. So you have that understanding, because you are underneath the stand, you're underneath where everything actually happens. First of all, you create that subconscious, subliminal structure that lies inside of you. And whether you have a lot of time, because sometimes, let's be honest, when it comes down to acting, sometimes the text comes in like the night before or 2 days before. In a regular memorization process, you probably need up to 7 days to kind of have the text, to kind of learn the text completely and absorb it and make it our own. So what do we do when we don't have that amount of time, when we need to go fast? We need to excavate faster. The more our understanding goes about what we're saying, the faster we can learn and adapt and internalize the words. So we need to excavate that ditch on which we can place our foundation on top. We need to understand what the words are really about. What are we saying? And here comes the thing. Your memorization process doesn't start with your next audition. Your memorization process starts during your private time, during your free time. You need to study words. You need to understand what words actually mean. Like, before you go and memorize lines, why don't you dissect language before it actually happens? Why don't you study what words actually mean, where they come from, who has used them before you, and what they meant to those people, to those authors, before you kind of read them for the first time and tried to memorize them? Because the more words, the more meanings, the more understanding you have of language, of what you are saying, the easier you can learn afterwards. Does that make sense? That understanding I'm talking about the architecture of language, that is memorization, goes through learning what words actually mean. And you can do this in many, many different ways. There are millions of techniques, great resources, great YouTube channels, great pages, websites everywhere. You can look them up and find them pretty easily, where people teach you, where people will tell you what words mean and how you can study them, and what words are actually doing with your system, where they come from, what the original meaning was, so on and so forth. There are millions of examples. But one great way I personally love is to put the word in the middle and to create a spider web around it with pretty much every word I use. Like, if you have complicated words or easy words, it doesn't really matter. Put your initial word in the middle of a blank sheet of paper and create a web around it. That's why it's called World Wide Web in a way, right? This is internet. It's made out of words, out of language, out of meaning, information. So the more information you have around that word, the easier it is then to recollect what the meaning, the original was, and then memorize it afterwards. So if you have a word, what is the antithesis of that word? What is the thesaurus? What is the antagonist word? What is the associate meaning? What does it also mean? Are there any other relations to that word? Where is the origin? Where does it come from? Who invented this word? Who used it for the first time? Where is its most famous predecessors? And so on and so forth. And you will see, wow, this is a great amount of knowledge I can put into my system before I actually learn and memorize my first line in any script. I know. That seems like a lot of work, but guess what? The more work you do before, it's like a pianist, right? You have to kind of exercise your notes, your tones, your harmonies way before you learn a certain piece. Before you do learn a certain piece, before you memorize the lines, make sure to have total control of your words. And it's way easier to memorize them afterwards because you have a full understanding of their true purpose, of their true meaning. So what are you saying in the script? Do you know your words? Do you know your lines? Do you have a complete idea of how to, get a grip of those words and how to control them, manipulate them, how they sound? Yeah, if you do so, then it will be way easier for you to memorize them, to kind of put them into your system, even if you have a very little amount of time at your requirement. And that's where the whole thing starts, because acting is like a science. It's like a science of your body. It's the science of your voice. It's the science of meaning, of emotions. And the more quality you put into that science, the more research you do for that science you make on your own, the easier then the results will be and the outcome will be and the process will be. So what am I saying here? The brighter and the clearer my vision is, the better I can learn and internalize them, the more authentic and genuine I come across as a character when I'm displaying that, when I'm using them, when I'm deploying my performance inside of the casting director's office. Pretty easy stuff, right? Pretty basic. You can implement it right away. Just grab a computer, Google it, go to the Oxford dictionary, go to several dictionaries, etymological dictionaries, study great authors and writers and poets and what kind of words they used, and of course study the more complicated words first. Get a grip on very complicated, very strange sounding words, because also when you need to improvise later on, the more words you have in your arsenal, in your mental arsenal, the faster you can shoot them, the quicker you have a response, the more synthetic, easier and the more natural you come across later on, and the more believable you are as a character. If you have to search for the word and kind of try to fill in the gaps with your mannerisms, like, that's not believable. You're kind of shifting, you're kind of phasing out. Studying the words, meaning being ready to perform. Studying their meaning means you're right there, having complete control of your language, and you can use the right words for the right mood, and you have complete control of how you pronounce them, how you spell them, how they come out of your mouth, out of your throat, how you kind of fill up the room with that word. If you don't have control of the word, if you don't know the meaning of the word, if it doesn't really resonate with you, if you don't have any deeper reflection on that word, even if you memorize and you have it perfectly, it sounds flat. It sounds like a sheet of paper. It's just artificial. It's not yours. So especially when you have just a little amount of time to memorize your next big upcoming audition, it's great to study beforehand what words actually mean. And of course, get a grip on those words where you think like, this is a word I never was able to spell correctly, or it kind of sounds like gibberish when I spell it. I don't really know what it means. It's like slipping out, but I can't really control it or manipulate it or give it any lasting impression. So make sure to do that. Another very easy thing that you can do, that will be my second fundamental tip, is to highlight your words, highlight your lines. Yellow is great, red is great, whatever kind of spots, whatever kind of jumps into your face, whatever kind of, stands out. This is your line. This is what you're saying. This is the reason why you're in the scene. You have to memorize, they have to stand out, they have to be important to you. And to kind of send that signal to your brain, highlight everything. Of course, to highlight them, you need to print them out on a sheet of paper. Don't learn your words from your computer or from your cell phone. That is obnoxious for your brain. That is the death of naturality, a spontaneous and natural reaction to your words. Print them out on a sheet of paper so you have them in your hands. You have control over them, because the relationship between your hands, your eyes, and your brain when you're holding something is completely different than just having the screen, the flat screen of your computer. You don't have a relationship with that screen. It's just artificial. The light kind of hits your brain and it causes so many distortions actually that puts you on a different path. It's not good for learning purposes. Print everything out, highlight it, hold it in your hand so you can control it and you have it there every time you need it. Don't look at a screen. Don't read it in columns. Read it as if it was thought by the author on a sheet of paper. That's organic, that's yours. I know some people might say, well, the environment, well, nature, well, the trees. Yeah, guess what? A computer was built out of electronics and technical components and a lot of stuff that is toxic to the environment as well. A sheet of paper is way less toxic and leaves a way smaller footprint, an energetic footprint on planet Earth than building a computer, a laptop, or anything like that. So please, it's not about the environment, it's about art. It's about how you come across. It's about being authentic. You need to hold that text in your hand so you can have it right away. You have it ready whenever you want to look at it. When you're somewhere, when you're reading it at the cafe or in the bar, you want to take some notes, or you're just traveling in your car by train, you need to get it out immediately, not kind of unlock it and wait for electricity, or you kind of need to plug in your cell phone because the battery's down in order to read your lines, which again, it's not healthy for your brain to read those small columns that are placed in a vertical manner. It's not a great way to memorize them. Your brain doesn't actually like that. Sheet of paper, take your notes, highlight it, make it clear so your brain absorbs the information way quicker and way deeper. Third, very fundamental tip, which might seem banal, is to read out loud. Don't read it comfortably, mumbling, jumbling, and babbling just here somewhere privately. Read it out loud. Make it clear. You can always diminish the volume later. You can always turn down the volume later on. But first, the first impact needs to be heard by your brain, by your ears, by your system. It needs to be absorbed by your system. It needs to stratify deeply. It needs to go down that path, down that road. It needs to be in your heart later on when it comes down to the audition. So read it out loud. You need to hear it. How does I sound? Is that believable? Is that authentic? Is there some irony? Is there some humor? Am I angry? Am I despiting this other character? What's going on? My relationship with the character I'm reading with, or that is part of the scene, even if it's a monologue, I need to understand clearly how I feel about the lines. And I can't do that if I'm not reading them out loud. I need to hear myself. If I do it quietly and very privately, it's gonna always stay here somewhere. It's not gonna cross that gap. It's not gonna build that bridge to my audience. I'm not gonna touch anybody. It's not gonna be a connection with my audience. I need to hear myself, and my audience needs to hear what I'm saying. So read them out loud, clear, fascinated, and then again and again and again loud. So I know exactly, okay, this works, this doesn't, this sounds funny, this sounds actually quite good, this I already kind of know what this is all about. So it makes sense to you, it makes sense to your brain, and you have way more fun in the process. Sheet of paper, highlight them clearly, read them out loud, have an exact idea what the words, the lines, the phrases, the sentences actually mean, and then when you have done all that, when you have your sheet of paper and you see all your lines, everything that you highlight, and you know exactly what it means, then you can start to kind of dissect them and put them in smaller sections. And once you have smaller sections, you can say, like, this first section, I say it in this and that way. It has this emotional anchor. The second section has a different emotional anchor. And the third section, again, has a completely different emotional anchor as well. So now I'm memorizing and I'm starting to put some emotional understanding underneath the lines. So it's way easier for me to kind of tap into that pocket, into that section of the scene, of the monologue, of the sales presentation, of the pitch. I know exactly, this is my emotional anchor that is attached to that section. I know what I'm saying in here. This is my second emotion and my third emotional anchor. I know what I'm saying here and I know what I'm saying there. I have full controls of the words because I know what they mean. I read them out loud, so I have a complete control of how I spell them, how I pronounce them. I can manipulate them. And now I start to play with the transition from one section to the other, and the whole thing amalgamates. It becomes an arc. It becomes a real speech, a real monologue. It becomes yours. Even in a small amount of time, these three very basic, fundamental little tools, instruments and techniques can help you to internalize the lines, memorize the lines way quicker, and also come across as way more believable and authentic because you make them yours right away. It's not just a word, it's your word. It's your line, it's your poetry, it's your song, it's your sales pitch, it's your monologue, it's your scene. So make them yours. Don't just use them like, okay, I memorized them, but I don't have any affection or any connection with them. No, with every word you're saying, you have a deeper, meaningful connection. This is truly where the acting craft is built upon how to memorize the lines correctly. The better you memorize the lines, the more research you do beforehand, the more you know about your words, the clearer the sections are and the emotional anchors that are attached to them, the better you come across, the faster you learn them, the more genuine you can represent them in the casting director's office or during the self-tape process. And now let's hit the more, let's say, complicated, a bit more advanced techniques, how we can now, once we created that foundation, how we can build up that high rise, how we can build up that cathedral, that beautiful architecture of our speech, how we can impress people with the ornamentation and the little details and the facets that will make this whole thing yours and outstanding and truly remarkable. Let's get right into it. So you see, I tried to leave this whole thing as general as possible. But this now is a bit more for bigger texts, a bit more complicated to kind of get into right away. But don't worry, you know, I've been there and I just used them and I practiced them and I implemented them over and over and over again until they became my second skin. Until it's muscle memory, because your brain it works like your muscles. You need to work it out. You need to exercise, and then it will start to grow. Not right away, but you will perceive it over a certain period of time that there is a constant growth. With persistence and relentless practice and repetitions, you will see how this kind of internalizes and it will become part of your performing behavior. It will become part of your toolbox. So, first tool is rhythm. Rhythm is everything. That's everything. You can start to kind of imagine where rhythm can take you. Rhythm moves your body. Rhythm activates dopamine releases in your brain. Rhythm goes in every single pore and kind of transforms your mood. Rhythm is the way where we're placing our monologue on that river, on that stream of conscious that we're leaving out of our mouth, that comes out of our mouth. Our speech is a current, it's a flow of words. But rhythm gives us those little islands in the middle of that stream, in the middle of that creek, where we can hop from one side of the riverbank to the other, where we can place safely our foot upon and kind of take a little rest and then take a little break and then jump to the next little island, so on and so forth, till we reach the end of that creek, of that river, till we arrived at our destination. Rhythm is the immediate response of our body, of our consciousness to the speech patterns, to the lines, to the phrases we need to memorize. And with rhythm, everything becomes way easier to learn, especially if you have a big text. It's kind of already in there. You just need to listen to yourself. Once you memorize roughly what your first section is about, try to place a rhythm into that section. How does that section come across? How do these lines sound to you? Where does this rhythm come from? Is it more like a loose beat? Is it more a hip-hop beat? Is it more like a heavy metal thing going on? Is it more a classical kind of environment where your beat is placed in? You need rhythm. You need your own rhythm. You need your own pace. You need your own speed. And that's not just being fast, or it's not just the velocity of your pronunciation. It's the rhythm. It's the inherent rhythm that is in there, in that speech. Rhythm makes the whole thing come alive. It makes the whole thing come across as being organic, as being yours. So once you exercise, it's gonna be way easier to learn the words, the lines, because it's not just the emotional anchor that you have attached to a small section, what we discussed beforehand, but it's also now like, what kind of rhythm does this emotional anchor have? Like or slower. You see, there's a certain persistence in rhythm. There's a certain, you're insisting with something. You have an intensity that is building up. You have that critical mass that is coming up. And that is the rhythm that is incorporated in every line and every word you're saying. It has a certain rhythm. If it doesn't have a rhythm, it's bland, it's boring, it's just artificial. It's just like everybody else would pronounce it. It's not just a word, it's an emotion. It's not just an emotion, it's a melody. It's not just a melody, it's a rhythm. Because in the end, everything is a song. So rhythm is a very fundamental tool for, the upgrade of your language, of your presentation, of your scene. Rhythm will help you to stand out and internalize way quicker, especially if you have a big text that you have to learn in no time, like yesterday. Yeah, like it happens so many times. Yeah, we need your self-tape for tomorrow, and it's like 16 pages or 10 pages. How we get in there? By using rhythm to break it up. Because rhythm also changes the way we approach the lines and approach the text. If you approach your text out of your ordinary linear automatisms that you always perform in the same way, right? You start your day, you have your workout, you have your breakfast, you fix up the little chores that you have to do, your errands that you have to run, and then you kind of sit down and memorize the lines. That's very boring. That's very linear. Nothing special will come out of that process. But rhythm kind of breaks up this whole everyday routine and that everyday procedure, and now your brain starts to realize, I'm working with something else here. It's about art. If I don't use a rhythm pattern, nothing that is kind of mine, and in terms of how I would say it, in terms of how I would attach a beat to it, then it just stays a very flat delivery. Then it just stays normal. Then it's just language. I can't really hook onto it as an audience. I need those hooks. I need those emotional anchors, and I can underline these emotional anchors by using the right rhythm. And this is also a great way of memorizing huge chunks of text, big text, way, way quicker. So turn up some music. Turn up a nice hip hop beat. Like just the instrumental version of a great song, something that evokes a certain emotion, maybe that you can use for the text as well, that is kind of similar to what's going on in the text. And then you will see you get a way quicker connection. You can bridge the gap of, oh, now I need to learn. Now it's mine already because I used the right rhythm. It's just about to filling the blanks and put everything into the right perspective. Because beforehand, we laid the foundation, and now we start to kind of build the structure, and the structure is built, architecture is frozen music, like Schiller, the famous German poet, once said. If architecture is frozen music, then acting is music in motion, right? It's music in telling something. That's why it's called also musicality. And musicality is based on a rhythm. It's based on, how does this ship look like? My relationship with the audience has a certain look, has a certain feeling, has a certain rhythm attached to it. And how does the ship look like? How does it travel through the ocean of understanding, of words, of speech, of monologues that I'm trying to deploy in front of the camera on stage? That's the rhythm. That's my pattern. Once I get a grip of the rhythm, I get a way quicker grip of the lines themselves, especially when we're talking about huge chunks of text or information that I need to get across precisely. Second, slightly more stratified tip is to write the whole thing down. Like, you have your text, print it out on a sheet of paper. Don't memorize it from the sheet of paper. Don't memorize it from your lines. Write it down. Transcribe it. Because again, the relationship between your hand, your arm, your muscle memory, your eyes, were perceiving a lot of information, and your brain processes and digests the whole information and kind of attaches meaning and rhythm to it. It's gonna work way quicker once you write everything down. I know, if you don't have a lot of time and you have huge chunks of text, then this whole procedure might take too long, right? If you just have 2 days to memorize it. But let's say you have a very complicated section of the monologue, or of the scene, or of the presentation you have to make, whether it's complicated words or it's just hard for you to remember, or it's just complicated in itself by the expressions that you have to use. Writing it down will be a tremendous tremendous help to internalize it, memorize it, and also make it yours. Again, because that's a very intimate relationship that I have with myself, with my hand, with my brain, with my eyes. I'm observing, perceiving what my hand is writing, and that's the text from the author. So it's not that abstract text written on a sheet of paper anymore. No, I'm writing it with my own writing. I'm transcribing it, I'm transforming it. That transition from one sheet of paper to the other sheet of paper, which is now my sheet of paper, makes the whole process magical. And you can't imagine, like, taking just that hour of time of transcribing it, how faster you will memorize the lines instead of just having this distant relationship to somebody else's words. Make it yours also by transcribing it, by writing it down. And if you want, you can also write it backwards or read it backwards by flipping the meanings, the words, the combinations, and how you place them on the paper. You can play and manipulate the words later on way easier, improvise way easier, and again, you're internalizing the whole thing way quicker. So that's a tremendous boost. Even if it feels like slowing the process down, eventually that little time that you have invest more will turn out to be a greater facilitator to have a way quicker compression into your head and way deeper also. It becomes way more meaningful once you write it down, because that's a magical combination. It's also great for your brain. It calms down your nerves. It's a great way to kind of control your breathing patterns. There's so many advantages to writing stuff down, to writing your thoughts down, but especially to writing down the lines that you have to memorize. Try it until the ambulance comes. Then there is this thing about repeating the lines. Like Michael Caine says in his book, Acting and Film, which I can only recommend to read. I'm still reading it. I kind of read it like 100 times. It's one of the greatest books ever on acting. He says to repeat the lines loud many times, 1,000 times. You can do that. Repeat them as many times as you can, but try to watch out, because if your brain gets over fatigued by just the sheer repetition, if it's just a blind, senseless repetition, it won't get close to you. Repeat it with emphasis, with passion, with the right stimulus. If you just repeat it for the sake of repeating it, actually it won't help. You need to repeat it consciously, with passion, with the right instinct, with the right impression. Now that we have laid down the fundamentals, now that we've, building up that cathedral, make sure that every repetition, every brick that you put into that column fits perfectly. Otherwise, the whole building becomes shaky. Just repeating it for the sake of repeating it doesn't really help. You need to repeat it consciously, with great emphasis, accentuate, exaggerate, make it great, make it big, make it large. Then you can diminish, you can turn down the volume later. But first, repeat it. And again, if it's a big, huge text, if it's a lot of words, a lot of lines, then again, pick out the sections that you're not feeling totally secure with, that are still shaky, that you have trouble memorizing with, and repeat those sections a couple of times. Like, when I say a couple of times, I don't mean like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, maybe not 1,000 times like Michael Caine said, but let's say 50 times will be a great way, like, to kind of make sure that this whole thing gets in here and in there. Be obnoxious, be obsessed about your words. They are your tools, your instruments, your weapons, your arsenal. If you don't repeat them, if you don't have every word, every line internalized perfectly, you're not learning the right stuff. You're not fully prepared. Your axe isn't sharp enough. Like the man, the legend, the myth himself, Abraham Lincoln, once said, if you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I use the first 4 hours to sharpen my axe. Such a great example of what I really mean. Like, repeat this process over and over again. And if it's boring to you, again, put on some music, some classical music, some great hip hop beats, some techno music, whatever you like. Put some music underneath it. If you want to step up your game for real, then use the music that is corresponding to the emotional anchor of the section, of the text, of the monologue, of the sales presentation that you have to memorize. Does that make sense? Let's say your first section is all about love and passion, so you put on some upbeat music that kind of fits perfectly to the emotional anchor, and now you memorize the lines over and over again with the right rhythm, the right music in the background, and now you have that perfect sound with that part, with that section of the text, of the scene. And then you go and you have your transition to the next section of the scene, which is kind of more of a, you know, sad part of the scene, maybe more of a melancholic part, more of a contemplating part. You put the right music to it. Again, you're matching the music, you're matching the rhythm with what you want to learn, with the emotional anchor of that section. Again, that will help you tremendously to kind of put the lines into your head. Even if you have like big amounts of text that you have to memorize and to learn. Even if it's for just the next upcoming audition that is in a couple of hours. This will help you. Put some earbuds on, put the right music on, attach the right emotional anchor to it, small section with the right rhythm, and now you have the right driving force, the right fuel, that is the music that will help you to kind of nail and put the words in the exact position so they make perfectly sense when you pronounce them and you come across as believable, as authentic, as a genuine, powerful character.
Can I say something
Sure.
from here, from behind the camera?
Of course.
You should record yourself.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
This is a great tip. I love this tip. And I agree 100%. There's a dear, beautiful friend of mine, great actor, Daniel Alexander, and he kind of taught me this technique. And actually James Dean was obsessed about this as well. Like, record yourself, record your lines and listen to them while you're commuting, while you're traveling to the audition, while you're rehearsing for yourself, while you're sitting on your own. Like, record yourself. That's a great way to memorize the lines and also to kind of check if you are believable, if you sound credible or not. This works in both ways, right? Listen to yourself so you can memorize them way quicker, read it out loud, the whole text, listen to it, and now you have a great way of observing and checking if you sound believable, if it's real, if it's authentic. And of course, the memorization process will turn out to be way more fun and will, you know, happen way quicker. Last but not least, and probably the most important thing, we're building this architecture. We're building this monologue. That is architecture. Now, once we laid down the foundation, that was very basic. We weren't dealing with meanings and metaphors and putting too much emotions underneath it. We were just talking about the cold and rational process of learning, of memorizing the lines, right? But memorizing, of course, goes hand in hand with the performance. It's not something separated. This is a mistake like that even more educated actors actually do quite often. They think, oh no, I just need to memorize it, I memorize it, now I can perform it. As if those two things were kind of separated, like two different distinguished things. They are not. They are actually the same thing. And actually, the closer the performance is to the memorization process, the quicker you learn, the better you are with your performance. They are not two separate things. It's an alibi. To me, that sounds like an excuse. No, I can't improvise right now. No, I can't perform right now. First, I have to memorize. So please leave me alone in my little comfortable apartment until I've memorized everything, and then I can go out and perform. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like, memorizing and already performing goes hand in hand. Of course, first we lay the foundation. That can be rational, slightly more distant, more preoccupied about the logical process and about setting the right tune, the right patterns, and putting some little emotional anchors here and there without, you know, worrying too much about how this performance is going to look like and if it's believable or not. But the more stratified it becomes, the more text we have, the closer we get to the final product, to the performance. So this last tip is already, you can say, the bridge between learning and then actually doing and actually performing. We're transitioning from one riverbank to the other. Create images. What does this word mean? What does this line mean? This phrase, I. What does I mean as an image? What kind of image do you get when I say I? It's my eye? Or is it the Vitruvian Man of Leonardo da Vinci? Is it the David of Michelangelo? What is I for you? What does it really mean? What kind of image do you get when you say I, or you, or whatever, or perhaps, or thirsty, or Brian, or Ryan? What kind of images do you get? The clearer the images that you can attach to the words, to the lines, to the phrases, the easier it is to learn them, and the greater your performance, your experience will be when you kind of deploy it then afterwards. So right away, once you lay your foundation and you work your way up of building that beautiful cathedral, and you kind of start, putting the finishing points and, the details and refinishing the whole thing, refurbishing the whole thing, then we can start to kind of create images. What does it mean to me personally to say these things? What kind of images do I get? Like, for example, there are many ways like to memorize names, right? You get into a room and you have, like, let's say you're new to Hollywood, you get introduced to a room full of producers and directors and very important influential people, and they have all different names, and that's very important and vital, and I'm speaking out of personal experience here, to remember the names of important influential people in your industry, in your sector, in your business section, right? You need to know exactly that was him, that was her, and because if you mix up names, people can get offended by it. And also great to remember, no, I talked to this and this producer, his name was so and so, and I talked to her, to this casting director, and she was marvelous, her name was this and that. So there's this great way of learning names by transforming the names into images. Like, let's say Brian, then you think about a brain. Brian and brain kind of sound similar, right? So you have this Brian, which to you suddenly appears as a giant brain on two legs, which is also a very funny image, kind of scary too, but it's kind of funny, right? You have this big brain sitting there with his glasses and speaking in this very strange sounding accent. That's Brian. And then you have Ryan. I just used that name before, so I'm using Ryan. And Ryan likes to run. So it's a runner. It's an athlete. So Ryan is the athlete. Brian is the brain. And then there's Sheila. Sheila is Shira, and she is part of the masses of the universe. And now you got this Amazon beautiful warrior queen that is holding a sword. That's Sheila, and that's Brian, and that's Ryan. So there's an athlete, there's a brain, and there is an Amazon warrior queen. Okay, I know. I kind of exaggerated a little bit, but this is just to make a point. What words can actually teach us, what they can give us. And there are no frontiers, there are no boundaries in your head. There are no holds barred. You can use whatever technique. This is just breadcrumbs I'm giving out, I'm sharing here with you guys. This could be actually a premium class. Don't you think this could be a premium class? I'm just giving this out for free. I must be nuts. But this just to emphasize the fact how many different techniques and how many paths you can go down. I'm just sharing what I am using pretty much on a daily basis. I'm shooting every day. I'm about to, get picked up by the driver because I need to go to my studio lot and I need to perform. And sometimes I shoot like 10 hours in a row. I need to memorize a lot of lines. So what I'm telling you guys, what I'm sharing here, what I'm trying to explain here, just part of my own experience. It worked for me. Maybe something completely else works for you. I'm just trying to give you some hints and tools and some little techniques that, in my opinion, will make your life easier when it comes to memorizing the lines and coming across as a more believable character. Because sometimes, like I'm saying right now, if you're creating an image for a word, maybe you're losing your line because you have a big text that you had to memorize in a very short amount of time. And it's quite natural that you kind of slip sometimes if you have like huge scenes, right? I mean, nobody expects from you like to have this perfect lecture going on if you had just a little amount of time to memorize the lines. But once you have a clear image, you can also kind of go sideways and maybe forget something and replace it by something else that works perfectly. Sometimes it's not the exact word that was written in the text, but then you find another word that suits perfectly, that is perfectly fine to kind of compensate that and to replace that initial word. By creating images attached to the words, again, you're helping yourself in many ways. First of all, an image always creates an emotion. So you have an emotional anchor to a word once it is, translated into an image. It's not that flat word anymore. It becomes something three-dimensional. It's way more plastic and tangible. Second of all, it's more fun for you to imagine. And guess what? If you have fun, your brain has fun, it won't be as tired as another brain that just needs to learn through endless and senseless and lifeless repetition. Once you attach images to words, lines, phrases, and chunks of text, it's way more fun for your brain to remember. So it has a way easier time to get to the line, to the text, to the section of the monologue, to the scene. And it won't be as fatigued as the brain that needs to mechanically go through every stage and every hallmark that you place yourself on the page in order to learn the whole thing. So it kind of becomes also more fluid. It is a way more liquid process, which is way more fun to watch and way more fun to deploy and to perform in the first place. So it's easier to learn, it's less energy that you have to invest, it's more vivid in its expression, it's more powerful because it has a certain connotation that just belongs to you and will leave a way more lasting impression with your casting director. If you attach images to your words and you have a full control on how your words actually sound and what they mean, and if you have that construction, that architecture perfectly mapped out and then executed, this building, this theoretical building, that monologue that you're leaving in the brain, that you're leaving in the room of your audience, in the counterpart's brain, it will have a way more lasting impression. It will stay there for way more time than just a monologue that was said and performed technically in an acceptable way, but without secondary and other associate meanings. It won't be as enriching. I'm always talking about how to enrich your performance. And this is a great way of making it richer. Enriched by your experience, by the beautiful things you put into your system. Richness, wealth, will fade. It's materialistic. It's not part of a metaphysical process. If you die, if you go, your richness won't follow. It will stay in your bank account. It's just numbers and figures. You can become successful, but you can't become success. Successful means that you have control over your actions and you know exactly what you're doing and you are doing what you love to do. That is successful. But you can't become success. Success is just a metaphysical principle. You can't take that with you. But if you are enriched, if you are rich by the work, by your craft, by the skills, by the repetition, and by the love and the passion and the consistency that you put into your rehearsals, into learning the lines and memorizing them with a certain technique and an ability to go deep in a very short amount of time, that richness, that enriched environment that you leave will stay with your audience. The more enriched you are by your images that you associate with your words, the more the audience will have that fulfilling moment of listening to somebody who really enjoys what he's doing and will feel enriched by your experience as well. And that's why if you say I'm sharing something, it becomes bigger in the process, because now you're sharing your enrichment, somebody else, he becomes enrichment. Now it's way more enrichment. Now you're sharing a bond. There is communication going on. This is memorizing the lines in an organic, in an enriching way, in terms of I really believe what I'm saying. I really love what I'm saying. I'm just not using words. I'm using communication and language to build that magnificent structure that will uphold, that has perfect resistance and static and is full of beautiful little details. So I can admire this forever. I said we can do many videos about memorizing the lines because there are many different techniques and ways of doing it. Maybe the most important thing is that you have fun in the process, that you love words. If you don't love language, if you don't love words, if you don't love communication, it's kind of hard to let people fall in love with your character. Because communication is not just saying things, it's using your body and everything, and that has a language too. So you really need to have fun in the process. So adjust to everything you're doing. Take the words out of the context and put them into your context, in your basket. You don't want the words of the author to stay in that basket. You want them to be placed in your basket so they are part of your arsenal. What I mean by that is if you just, if you turn off this video then and then your next audition comes in. So use the words with your context, with your everyday life, while you're cooking, while you're cleaning up your room, while you're driving your car, while you're at the cemetery, while you're jogging, while you're riding the bicycle, while you're doing all the things that you're usually doing without saying the lines. Now you're doing them by using the lines. Now you're integrating into your linear automatisms what you just learned, and you're placing the lines in this new context that is your context. All of a sudden they will completely appear as yours. All of a sudden they will be yours, part of your energy field, part of your environment, part of your context on how you want to say things in life and as an actor, as the role. Don't just leave them on a sheet of paper. Transcribe them and then use them, make them actionable. Put them in your everyday continuous processes, habits, routines, chores, errands that you have to run, and use your lines while you're doing these things, even if it's a bit more complicated. I'm not just talking about, smashing a ball against the wall, just while you're cooking and cutting the onions and cutting the carrots and stirring the sauce and doing all these things. You're saying the lines. All of a sudden, you're not as preoccupied anymore as before by saying the lines correctly. No, you're preoccupied with your actions. And now the lines come out naturally because now there is no gatekeeper anymore who's kind of, judging you and your ego and all these little things that happen that are judgmental that won't serve you at all. By developing a natural and beautiful performance. Put them in your basket, put them in your context, in your situation. It's part of your frame, not of anybody else's frame. If you leave them in the frame of the author, then you won't frame them for yourself while you're auditioning. So it's very easy to disrupt and dismantle your performance just by saying a word. If it's your frame, your context, you can withstand the power of judgment or harsh critique or negativism, or if somebody tells you, well, just change it and flip it. How do you think you will be able to flip it if it's not your context, if it's not your frame? If it's your frame, no problem, I flip it, turn it upside down. I can manipulate my lines. I can go different ways. I can go down different paths without problem, flawlessly, right away. I know exactly what 3 + 3 means. It's 6. It's equals 6. I don't have to think about it, no problem. I'm the holder of the frame. I'm telling you what context I'm placing my words in. And now you can admire my plate, my piece of art, because words are art. Your lines are art, and art needs to be filled and filled with passion, with compassion, with love, with consistency, the right rhythm, with the right patterns, with all these tools. Now you have something that you hang up in the wall and will stay there. It's a clear imprint of your expression. So I have so much fun with all these different tools, with all these different techniques and instruments. If you have any further questions, please let me know down there in the comment section below. Subscribe and leave a like. Follow us on Instagram. We have many adventures going on there too. And you can DM me on Instagram anytime you want. I have some other topics covered there. It's more artsy. There's a lot of beautiful stuff to discover there as well. Also go to my website. It's thecoachmc.studio, of course, and you can contact me through that. If you want some one-to-one lessons, if you want to work on your show reel, on your audition, on your casting call, on a nice monologue, on your next sales pitch, presentation, whatever you got in mind, I'm your man. See you next time. Thanks so much, guys, for clicking that button. I think this video is complete and now you're ready to perform. That should be premium content, by the way.